We all know the Detroit Pistons are coming off one of the worst seasons in NBA history, the worst season in franchise history. We went on a super duper crazy long, emotionally traumatizing losing streak, laughing stock of the NBA. And when all of these things happen, a lot of people expect you, when the offseason comes around, a lot of people expect you to make some big splash, some big move to turn things around when you have a season that bad. But when you're a small market team like the Detroit Pistons, you can't just go out and sign Paul George like the Philadelphia 76ers did this offseason, or go get Klay Thompson like the Dallas Mavericks did this offseason. You have to actually start from the bottom, and you have to build this thing up, and you have to make it through trades. You have to make it through drafting the correct players, hiring the right coaches, things of that nature. And then when you start to hit on those things, when you start to make the right trades, when that young talent starts developing and you start showing a winning culture, you can go out and go get some of those higher end free agency. But as of right now, the Detroit Pistons, they are at the bottom of the food chain. And looking at this offseason, I think they did a great job. They didn't make no big splashy move. They didn't go out and get another superstar, but they did little things that could potentially put the Detroit Pistons on the right track and get them going in the right direction, which is up. And any progress for the Detroit Pistons, any progress right now, that's a huge win for this team. But looking at what we did so far this offseason, as a fan, as a Pistons fan, I am quite happy with what is going on. And when you look at the season that they had last year, and all of the turmoil, it honestly starts at the head of the snake, and that's where the Detroit Pistons started at, cutting loose Troy Weaver, and also cutting loose Monty Williams, who we made at the time the highest paid coach in NBA history. And after one season, we had to let him go. So getting rid of those two guys, and I think they got two pretty good replacements. They brought in GM Langdon from the New Orleans Pelicans, who was the second man in charge under David Griffin. We see how good of a team the New Orleans Pelicans are. I think the only problem with the New Orleans Pelicans is that they got a terrible injury bug. But from a talent perspective and their young talent getting developed, they have a great situation going on over there. And they're kind of in the same they're in the same situation as the Detroit Pistons. The New Orleans Pelicans, they're not going to get no big free agency signing. They're not going to have guys running to New Orleans in the offseason. But they started from the bottom. They developed their young talent, and now they have a really solid basketball team. And President Langdon, GM Langdon, he played a huge helping hand in that in his time in New Orleans. And then also replacing Monty Williams, we have Coach J.B. Bickerstaff, who has experience coaching young teams, developing young teams, and helping them win games. He was a really decent coach with the Cleveland Cavaliers, got them to 2 consecutive playoffs appearances after the post-LeBron James era. So he did some really good work in Cleveland, working with super young players like Evan Mobley and Darius Garland. So I think bringing those two guys in are going to be very beneficial for the Detroit Pistons. And we've already seen GM Langdon, he's been doing a pretty solid job so far, starting with what he did in this year's NBA draft. We look at what we got in this year's NBA draft, the 2024 NBA draft. Somehow we were haunted with the 5th overall pick once again. The NBA seen all the turmoil, all the emotional distress we've been in over the last couple of seasons. I still don't know how Victor Wembanyama is a San Antonio Spur instead of a Detroit Piston, but nonetheless, I'm grateful for Jaden Ivey. I'm also grateful for this year's 5th overall pick, Ron Holland. And Ron Holland, he's an extremely great athlete, great ball handle, great handle on the ball, great handle on the ball. He does a great job of getting downhill. He's a supreme athlete, and the best part of his game is his ability to get downhill and finish around the rim. He's also really good on the defensive side of the ball, gets a lot of on-ball and off-ball steals, can block shots around the rim. Just a supreme athlete. And the one struggle of his game right now is his ability to knock down the three-point shot. His one season in the G League, he shot 23% from the three-point line, but GM Langdon, he knew that this was an issue, and I'm paraphrasing here. He said a lot of players towards the top of the NBA draft with high upside, their shooting was an issue too. But he feel like with the hiring of shot doctor and assistant coach Fred Vinson, he feel like that he could fix this issue for Ron Holland. And he said if this issue does get fixed, Ron Holland is going to turn out to be a great NBA player. And I like this selection. Like we stated in the introduction of the video, the Detroit Pistons are at the bottom of the food chain right now. So in the NBA draft, you get a pick that high, you don't want to just find a guy that's a knockdown shooter. You find the best available player and the best player with the highest upside, because you would take care of those things later in the offseason, and the Detroit Pistons have done that. And we're gonna get into that in this video as well, but we have one more draft pick to talk about, and that's Bobby Klintman, who was a second-round draft pick by the Detroit Pistons, and he's been putting on a show this summer league. He's been showcasing his skills a lot. He's 6'9", so he has tremendous size, and he has the ability to be an effective defender, an effective playmaker, and also being an effective three-point shooter. So I think this could be a player to look out for, who could potentially find himself a spot in this rotation with that type of size, the ability to stretch the floor, play defense, and make plays. But he's going to have a lot of competition because the Detroit Pistons, they have a lot of wings and they have a lot of forwards. With the addition of Tobias Harris, you have Asor Thompson still there. You have Ron Holland, who's there now. You have Fontecchio, who just signed an extension. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see if he could crack that rotation. But I'm glad that he's a part of the Detroit Pistons. So I think they did a great job with what they were given in this year's NBA draft. They didn't try too hard, but they also didn't try too little. So I'm happy with those two guys. And then we move on to that next phase in the offseason. We move on to the free agency and making trades. And I think once again, the Detroit Pistons, they did a fantastic job with what they can do and with the situation that they're in. The free agency signing with the most cachet this season was probably bringing in Tobias Harris. He's a pretty popular basketball player. He became popular when he played with the Philadelphia 76ers, playing alongside Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons sometimes. Both of those guys have huge followings in the NBA world. So everybody should know who Tobias Harris is, and he's going to come in, he's going to help fill that biggest void that we've been looking for as Pistons fans, and that's to help stretch the floor and knock down three-point shots. And I actually think alongside a player like Cade Cunningham, who's a willing passer and draws a lot of attention, I think Tobias Harris could potentially average 20 points for his next season. I think every game he's going to knock down at least two 3-pointers, especially standing in that deep corner. But Tobias Harris, he's a knockdown 3-point shooter. He's a player that you're not going to sag off and dare to shoot. Players are going to be closing out to him and staying close to him at all times. So just having him out there as a respected shooter is going to be very beneficial. And he brings a lot more to his game. He can put the basketball on the floor, score at all three levels. He has a post game as well. A very solid offensive player. So I'm happy with the addition of him. We also made a trade for another shooter, Tim Hardaway Jr. Now, with the way things are looking, Tim Hardaway Jr. He might have to compete for some minutes as well. But he's another player that if his number is called, he can knock down the three-point shot. He's a three-point shooter that can get hot. He can score the ball. Over his tenure with the Dallas Mavericks, he's averaged 15 points per game. Last season, 14 points per game. And when they got those new additions, his minutes kind of dwindled. His minutes kind of dwindled down. So we got him. And then also the latest free agency signing was Malik Beasley, who's also a knockdown three-point shooter. Now, Malik Beasley, when he's went to teams that were rebuilding and kind of struggling, that's when he's played his best. That's when he was a player that could give you 4 or 5 three-pointers per game. So I'm hoping he can come to Detroit with that same aggression and that same ability to knock down those three-point shots, because we need it. But that's what Malik Beasley is, an exceptional three-point shooter. And at the times he was playing on those on those not as good NBA teams when he was playing a lot of minutes. He was towards the top of the NBA in total 3-pointers made, up there with guys like James Harden, up there with guys like Buddy Hield, Stephen Curry. Malik Beasley was a league leader in total 3-pointers made. So having him is going to be big time as well. So the 3 addition of those guys right there, guys that can shoot the ball. We actually have a plethora of shooters now. Fontecchio, he can knock down the 3-point shot. Tobias Harris is a 3-point shooter. Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr. And I consider Cade Cunningham to be a good 3-point shooter too. He just doesn't get a lot of good looks. But the 3-point shooting, we can't really see if it's going to be solved until we see them get out on the court next year. But we know a step was made to try to get better in that area. Something that we really haven't seen in the last couple of years. So I think that's something to be excited about. And then finally, the Detroit Pistons, they have the plan. We know what the plan is right now. When GM Langdon came in, he let us know that he wants to stick with these young players. He sees a lot of talent in these guys, and he wants to develop this youth. So I think he did a great job of laying down his vision and then executing it, starting with the small steps, starting with baby steps to see if to take the biggest area where the Detroit Pistons were struggling in, try to solve that and see if that can help these young players develop. See if more spacing could benefit Cade Cunningham more, which I think he was already a stud, being able to put up 23 points per game and then 5+ in assists and rebounds. With all that attention, I think that's highly impressive. But see if it helps out guys like Jaden Ivey and Asor Thompson. Fred Vincent should help with those 3 guys as well. So this offseason, I'm quite happy with what went on, given what happened with the Detroit Pistons last season. Like I said, when you go through something like that, it's going to take time and it's going to take patience. But as long as you're making some type of progress, I think that's going to be great for the Detroit Pistons. But that's what I want to talk about with you guys today. New GM. A new GM who seems fresh, who seems like he understands the players, did a great job building a team with his previous organization. Good coach in JB Bickerstaff, who has experience coaching rebuilding teams. Did a pretty good job in the NBA draft with Ron Holland. Seems like a pretty good second round find, and Bobby Clintman, and then also bringing in 3-point shooters, Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., and then we still have the original young core of players. So I think next season is going to be very interesting, and I'm ready to get it underway so we can stop talking about how bad the last season was for the Detroit Pistons. But that's going to be it for today's video. If you guys enjoyed, please leave a like, comment down below how you feel about this offseason so far, and then subscribe for more weekly content. We do this all the time, man. And that's curtains.